Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 1819, 1819. I am your host, Mike Matthews. The name of this show is called
Mike's Daily Podcast.
And we're at Cafe Anyway. My name is Mike Matthews, and this is Podcastro Valley, where we're talking to you. And my dog's name is Sally. No, it's Basil. I've said this over and over again, and I've used that joke before, and that rhymed. It's a friend of mine. Hey, speaking of friends, last show we had
Mike's Daily Podcast.
A friend of mine who's an actual brewmaster, and he discussed with us amazing things happening
Mike's
at the brewery that
Daily
he works for.
Podcast.
In fact, he let me drink some.
Yeah!
That was really nice, wasn't it? Laugh when you don't really think something's funny. That's what I do. Makes life interesting. We have a microphone on Basil. Perhaps he will say something. Who knows? All I know is opioids. No. What? Why did I say that word? Because my lovely lady friend got some mail. I took her mail. Opioids and marijuana. Managing the nationwide emergency. It's a seminar. And since she's a therapist, she gets invited to seminars. Well, what's interesting is it talks about marijuana. And one of the sessions is cannabis, marijuana, and opioid overdose. A gateway drug or a reducer of risks? That's the question. Whether it be slings and arrows of unmitigated fortune. What is known and what is speculated about marijuana? It asks. From reefer madness to better science. And prescription use of cannabinoids. From, what's this called?
And here's today's podcast picture.
Dronabinol to cannabidol. And medicinal cannabis. I have heard cannabinoids are the worst thing for you. Does marijuana kill cancer cells or nerve cells? Scientific facts on short and long-term effects. And finally, would you prescribe marijuana to your mother? The rescheduling of cannabis evaluation. Oh, okay. So that's what they're going to talk about at this thing. Don't you want to go, huh? Don't you want to? Don't you want to go? Don't you want to fly? Basil. Singing along with me. Let's see. Well, we do have a podcast picture for you. Yesterday's was pretty cool, huh? That was the one with me and the lovely lady friend, and we were at the place where there was fun happening. That's all you need. How about this podcast picture? 4 years ago, to the day, just about, I had on, what was his name? The guy from Cloud Person. And Pete Jordan? I think that's what it, and Kai Alfred Hillig. And so, interestingly enough, on this date, my dog, 4 years ago, had been walking, we were walking down the street, and he suddenly lunges and barks at a dog on the other side of this fence. Well, he ended up stepping on like a nail or something, and it totally messed up his paw. And so I had to go and take him to the vet, and he had to have it all wrapped up. So there's a lot of podcast pictures here that I'm looking at from March of 2015, where Basil had to wear one of those cones. And he looked oh so peaceful, so happy. You did, Basil, you did. Even though you won't say anything on the show today, but yeah, he's going to take a little nap at this juncture of the show. Let's see. There's also a picture here of Daddy-O, who is a large Italian Mastiff or a Cane Corso, and we have not seen Daddy-O in almost 6 months. Because Basil can't walk up that hill at Fairmont Ridge where we used to see him all the time. So that is done. But we won't have that as a podcast picture either. As I speak to you, this exciting podcast thus far, I'm also doing laundry. Because what we have here is some dirty clothes, and they must be cleaned. They must.
Later that day.
Hey, by the way, Kyle Hillig makes some fantastic music, and I have a bunch of his songs and interviews with him at MikesDailyPodcast1819Clock. Just go to the interviews section, right there by the home section, interviews, A through Z. There is this very large house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. No, it's actually in Union City, in between Podcastro Valley and Hayward. No, wait. Hayward and Fremont is what I meant to say. And it is this big, interesting building. You can't miss it. It sits on top of this hill. And there's like nobody else, no other houses around this building. And that's kind of interesting because it's the Bay Area, and you would expect maybe some houses, some crowding in on its location. But the Masonic Home at Union City, located on Mission Boulevard near Dry Creek Pioneer Regional Park, which, by the way, you can go to, park in their dirt parking lot. And yes, you can see a dry creek. Actually, right now it ain't dry. It's running quite well. And there's a botanical garden there that's very nice. And usually I hear some peacocks for some reason around there. And then you can walk up through the back end of, what's that place called? Garmin. Do the Garmin Trail and all that. But the Masonic Home at Union City has been part of the Tri-City community for more than a century. Isn't there like a Tri-Valley, Tri-County, Tri this, Tri that, everywhere you go? In line with the Masonic principles upon which it was founded, the home has provided shelter and compassionate, respectful care for residents since its earliest days. As we go outside a cafe anyway, we're bringing Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley. It just looks freaky to me. When I see it, it's just big, this big looming thing. It's almost like a San Simeon. Well, it talks about the history in this article of the Masonic Home. The earliest Freemasons arrived in California before it was officially a state. Many participated in the Mexican-American War and helped found the first cities and communities. In 1848, when the gold rush began, many Masons were also among the thousands who flocked to California with hopes of making their fortunes. Unfortunately, along with the gold rush came disease. In 1850, cholera swept Sacramento, killing thousands. Masons helped build and maintain a hospital at Sutter's Fort. Isn't that where gold was discovered? Dipping into personal savings to relieve their community. By the mid-1850s, the Masons had formed regional boards of relief, providing what today would equal millions of dollars in assistance. Those who were affected more deeply by the ravages of cholera were widows and children, and California Masons dreamed of erecting a permanent structure to meet the needs of the families left behind by the loss of their patriarchs. So in 1891... the first organized plan was created to establish a Masonic Widows and Orphans Home. Approximately 16,000 California Masons donated more than $45,000 towards the campaign. In 1893, the Grand Lodge of California purchased a 305-acre plot of land in the area that was then known as Dakota. It's now Union City. There's Dakota Boulevard, and that street has always got traffic on it. It's the most frustrating street. When I used to drive to work, now I take BART, but when I used to drive to work and come home, and you remember, I used to talk about it all the time. I'd be at work at 5 in the morning, and then come home, and I'm super tired, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd have to take these side streets because the traffic on the freeways was so backed up. And I get on Dakota, and it's just a parking lot. Ugh. So in 1896, construction began, and after 2 years and an additional $104,000 in member donations, the first California Masonic Home opened its doors In 1898, the first residents were 41 Masonic widows and children. They must have been happy there. I mean, except for the cholera thing. What, too soon? Many of whom had been affected by the 1890s economic depression and the often dangerous work conditions in industries of the day. Yeah, not a very... Just read some Dickens and you'll find out about that. So that's all I wanted to read. I don't want to go into a whole... This isn't a pro-Masonic thing or whatever, but that is an interesting building that I used to drive past every morning on my way to work, driving down Mission, going from Podcaster Valley to Fremont, and I'd look over to the left, and there it was in all its glory with the shining lights. And Christmas time, they have this big tree, this huge redwood out front that they put Christmas lights on. And it's quite a beautiful spectacle. But that's what's going on with that, I guess. Hey, interesting factoid, not a cannabinoid, or the badobadoid, or whatever the hell that was. You know what? Yesterday, when I did the podcast with Kevin Drury, and we were over at 21st Amendment, we had some food. And let me tell you, their little food truck they have, which they pay for, and they have their own chef, and this chef guy made this amazing fried, what do you call them? Cheese curds. Oh, can I just tell you, they tasted so amazing. This was eaten right after the podcast. But may I say to you, dearest friend, that when I got home and when I woke up this morning, Mr. Mike Lactose Intolerant Matthews did not have the best of mornings, let's just say. Let's just leave that at that spot there. At that. Look who's here, by the way, outside a cafe anyway.
Hello, Mike Matthews. It's Chely Shoehart, gift shop supervisor. So why didn't Kevin do an impression of me yesterday?
I don't know. God, am I supposed to, know the answer to everything? Look who else is here. Oh, Mike, this is Floyd the Floorman. And this is John Deere, the engineer. Mike, she was just asking a question. You don't have to be mean. That's really offensive.
But if you get offended, that's the way the cookie crumbles. No.
Were you offended that Kevin didn't do an impression of you, too? Yeah, I was offended by that, too. Okay. Hey, I just have a couple minutes left. No, I don't, because I'm going to keep going. You know what? I defy time, and I think you should, too. Time is a friggin'... people don't get time. And I'm starting to sound like a Bangles song. Time, see what's become of me. As I look around at my abilities, I was so stupid to see. Look around, leaves are brown, and the sky is a hazy shade of winter. Salvation Army. And then, it's Simon and Garfunkel who wrote that. Damn, Paul Simon. Look at that guy. Okay, before you go, that's my dad's stupid music. No. He's quite the lyricist, that Paul Simon. I know you probably have heard If You Call Me, You Can Call Me Al. Or maybe you've heard Bridge Over Troubled Water. Or The Sounds of Silence. There you go. That's a hipster, stupid piece of crap song. Well, it was a great song until that stupid piece of crap band took it. What's that band called? Disrupted? Diffused? Debunked? I don't know. Some awful... There's a friend of mine that when my friend of mine hates a group or a band, my friend of mine goes, and that's really appealing, let me tell you. Yeah, so go back to the original, all right? The Simon and Garfunkel wrote it at a very pivotal time in our history as America. And they had something to say, and that was, there's something, they're written on the wall of the side of the listen to the people. They have something to say. Damn you. Democratic Convention of 1968, and you stupid Mayor Daley killing protesters, you jerk. Isn't that what that song was about? I'm not sure. I do know that Simon and Garfunkel wrote that song, Down to America, to our homeward bound. They just, so you can laugh all you want at my reminiscing. But that's some damn good music. Okay. So, no, see, And I like the Bangles remaking Hazy Shade of Winter, but the original is way better. I agree. Hazy Shade of Winter. All right. Where was I going with all of that? Time. Yes, time is complete. We all feel time, right? We understand time, right? Am I right? And time is elusive. Time sometimes doesn't, after a couple beers, you don't really notice it so much anymore. And that's good or bad or whatever. I think we should just forget about time sometimes. I do not wear a watch on my hand. Hey, Kevin Drury loves watches, by the way. We didn't get into a watch discussion. Perhaps we will. And who's watching The Watchmen? That's my question. But the thing is that watches make you too married to time, and you just have to let go. Let it go. Let it Disney. Let it just... Look, a big chunk of me is German, and we love the watches. Oh, the watches, they are the biggest Stück dafür. But the watches are that was a callback to the last, and callback is a callback to the last podcast. You'll have to check it out. That was episode 1818. Anyway, don't be a slave to time. That's my point. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Benita, the Disgruntled Fiddle Player, and the Brewmaster. Check out the website, MikesDailyPodcast1819Clock, with all the links to all the places you can check out the show and get in touch with me. 336MM Daily is also my number, and now the lovely Ariel will take us out.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at MikesDailyPodcast.com. Email Mike now at MikesDailyPodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye.
The podcast picture is of... we were talking about time, and I looked up clocks, pictures that I've taken that had to do with clocks, and there's this clock tower type building that I took this picture almost 8 years ago to the day, well, give or take a month or two. And this picture is the post office in Washington, D.C., the old post office, and I think this is near where all the Smithsonian museums are. Anyway, check it out at MikesDailyPodcast.com. Thank you. I got to finish my laundry.